Hello you beautiful people, I'm Bobsy, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to integrate Steam with your multiplayer game in Unity. Now in my case I'm going to be using FishNet, and well, let's just go from there. If you're not familiar with FishNet, I have a tutorial on this on my YouTube channel as well, which will also pop up in the top right corner, and you can go watch that first of all to get started understanding how to work with FishNet. Now if this video does end up helping you, leaving a like, commenting and subscribing would be much appreciated, but let's just get right into it. So first off, there are 3 prerequisites to making all of this work. First of all, you need to implement FishNet, which is why I refer to my first tutorial if you're not familiar with that. You don't have to be using FishNet, you can be using Mirror, NetCode or whatever solution allows for Steam integration. Then of course you can just convert it from there, but I'm going to be using FishNet and so it's going to be easier to follow along. Now another thing that you also need is you need Steam Heathens. You can go to the Steam Heathens under Unity and installation and you'll see that the foundation version is completely free. Now if you actually want to implement this for your game that you want to be releasing and so on, I would much recommend becoming a GitHub sponsor for them, which allows you to get the full version, which is just much better to work with. But for my case, I'm going to be going completely free with both FishNet and Steam Heathens to make sure that you guys can do this completely for free as well. When you click the installations instructions, you'll be taken to this page where the way that you really implement it is just by copying this full URL right here. You go into your Unity package manager and up on the plus on the top left corner, you can go to git URL and just paste it in here and click add, and it will implement the Steamworks Foundation package. It will also automatically be getting the steamworks.net as well as I believe the Steamworks Complete package. I could be wrong, but it will be getting all the prerequisites needed really, and that's why you have to do it like this. Next thing is we also need Fishy Steamworks. This is what really can connect Steamworks together with FishNet. This is the transport, which if you're familiar with FishNet, you probably know of Tugboat, which uses an IP. Well, instead Fishy Steamworks then uses the Steam64 ID of your Steam account. So this is why you need this. You can just go out to releases, pick the newest one, simply just download the Unity package and import that one as well. As soon as you have all these 3 things, which was FishNet, Steam Heathens and Fishy Steamworks, we're ready to go. Now as you can see here, I have pre-set up a scene already. This scene has absolutely no functionality, but what it does have is just a basic main menu where you can create a lobby or you can type in a lobby ID and press join lobby. Now if I go to the lobby as well, you can see that all I have here is just 2 buttons, which is a start game and a back, which will be leaving the lobby. We have an ID here, which is what we can use to join the lobby. Now you can also use Steam to join the lobby, but for this example I'm just going to be using the ID since in my opinion makes it easier to test, and then the lobby name as well, which we can set. And then we'll be moving on to the next scene, which if I just jump in here, you can see it's just this empty scene that I used for one of my other projects, and this empty scene is the procedural generation one. So once people join, they will then procedurally generate all the materials, which is from another multiplayer tutorial. So this is all I have, and first of all let's just get started with working with the Steam connection first of all. So let me just go back and set the main one to be active. Not that it really matters because we'll be making a menu controller anyway, but the first thing that we want to do is we want to create a new completely empty scene. Now this is how I like doing it. Keep in mind throughout the entire video that nothing that I say is, you know, law or the only rule that you can apply, but I'm just going to remove whatever's in the scene so it's literally completely empty, because this bootstrap scene, which I spelled completely wrong, bootstrap, there we go, this bootstrap scene is just completely empty. What this is doing is it will consistently be open in the background, so this scene will never be closed and it will be handling all the Steam connection and FishNet connection stuff that is needed. So if we create a new empty game object, we can call this one the bootstrap manager. Right, so on this bootstrap manager we're going to need to have the Steamworks behavior script on it. This is what will basically initialize Steam, and then there will be some Steam settings that you need to set up already. So if you go into my Steam integrations folder, you can see I already have some settings here. What you could do is just right click, go to create, Steamworks and settings. These settings that I have here is set up with the application ID of 480. This is what you should do as well to test. This is what's called Space War, I think the game is called, and it's meant for testing for Steam integration. So this is basically all I've changed in here. And now if we go to the Bootstrap Manager, we can just add this Steamworks settings here. And now already if we go into my Steam, you can see that I am just Bobsy and I'm just online. I'm not in a game. But if we start this scene right now and we go here, you can see now I'm in Space War, because we just connected with local user Bobsy with ID 0. So this means that we now already have a functioning Steam connection. Now let's get to doing the actual scripts. The first thing that I want is a bootstrap manager, which we're going to be putting onto the bootstrap manager here. There we go. And let's open up that script. Now, first things first that I want this bootstrap manager to handle is that we just go to our main menu scene. Obviously, we don't want the player to be stuck in this bootstrap scene. So in here, we'll just be going to having a string. So I'm going to make a serialized field because I don't want it to be public. Private string and then just menu name. And this can just be whatever that the menu is called. In my case, you can see the menu is just called menu scene Steam. So I can just go and name it that immediately. But we made it serialized field so we can always edit it in the inspector, which is just very nice. And let's just have the scene changing working. So the first thing that we do is we just make a public void, and I can just call this one go to menu. which all it will do is it will use Unity scene management. So we have to be using Unity engine.scene management. And in here we'll grab the scene manager .load scene, and this will be loading the menu name scene. And it's very important, as I mentioned, we want to keep the bootstrap scene open at all times. So we'll want to use the load scene mode of additive, which means that it doesn't close the other scenes, it just opens this as a new one in a layer. So let's go ahead and test that immediately. Now first things first is we added the Steamworks behavior, which we can then, when the Steam is initialized, we can have it call whatever that we want. So I'll be grabbing the Bootstrap manager and say go to menu. So this means that when we're fully connected to Steam, it will go to the main menu. Now it also have an initializing error here, which you can use to then maybe close the game, display some kind of error message if you want to. I'm not really going to be getting into that, but that's how you can use it. So now once Steam connects, it will go to the main menu. Oh, and also I completely forgot, we of course need to add it to the build settings. So of course I'll be adding the Bootstrap scene to the build settings. I'll be adding the main menu scene and the Steam game scene to the build settings. And now we can and there you go. Now you can see we're in the game and it went to the main menu because we connected successfully to Steam. Now, next things that we want to do is, well, going to be a few of them. First of all, we of course want to be able to get the network manager of FishNet. So I can do a serialized field, private network manager in fishnet.managing. So like so, and I'm just going to call this one underscore network manager. And we're going to be doing the exact same, serialized field, private, and then fishy steamworks, which we're also going to be using, dot fishy steamworks. And I'm just going to call this one underscore fishy steamworks. So now we can go and set these up immediately. So let's go and do that. For this, we're going to be using the FishNet network manager prefab that they already have set up. But there's a few things here that we don't need. First of all, we don't need the hot canvas because we are not going to be using that. So let me go ahead and unpack the prefab and just remove the hot canvas. And then on the network manager, of course, always make sure your spawnable prefabs are set to just the default one. And then on here, we want to grab these fishy steamworks component and add that to it. And we also want to add the transport manager, which is what allows us to use the fishy steamworks instead of tugboat, which is the standard. So we can just grab fishy steamworks down here, and you can see it should have already grabbed it. So this means that now we're using fishy steamworks and not the normal tugboat component for connecting. It's also important that you toggle this peer-to-peer option, because fishy steamworks, or the way that we're going to be using Steam at least, are going to actually be a peer-to-peer setup, but through Steam as a relay. If you've tried working with multiplayer using tools such as Hamachi or Zero Tier, it's basically the same idea, but Steam just handles the relaying automatically, which is very, very handy. So now let's go set these up in our Bootstrap manager. You can just drag the network manager in here twice, and now these are perfectly set up. Now going back in here, there is a few callbacks that we want to subscribe to. This is basically when our lobby is created, when somebody is requesting to join our lobby, and when the lobby has been entered, what will happen in these different states. So the way that we do this is we set up protected callbacks of type lobby created underscore t, and this one is just going to be called let's call it lobby created, and we can just copy this 2 more times because it's going to be basically the same but with different functionality. So game lobby join requested underscore t, and this one is of course going to be when the join request comes in, and then the last one is going to be our lobby enter underscore t, and this one will be when the lobby is fully successfully entered. So lobby entered, like so. Now we need to add these to actually call back and trigger some functions so we can set those up immediately. So let's go make those. So I'm gonna make a private void that's called on lobby created, and this is of course going to take in the type here, lobby created, and we can just call this the callback and open that up, and we have to do that for the 2 others as well. So private void on join requests, and this is going to take in this type and we'll call callback and open that. And the last one is going to be a private void on lobby entered. That's of course going to take in the lobby entered underscore t as callback. There we go. And now all we need to do is we need to subscribe to this. So we do this in the start functionality. So if I open up start, we can then say lobby created equals to callback of course the type, so like so, dot create, and then on lobby created. There we go. And now subscribe, so whenever this is triggered, this down here will be triggered and called. So let's just make 2 more lines of this to make it all line up. This is the join request and this is lobby entered, then just the types as well, and there you go. Now it's all set up so all these 3 callbacks are happening at the right time and they are now called. So but first of all, we also need a way of creating a lobby. So what we can do, which I like to use the singleton pattern for, because now we need to talk between the bootstrap scene and the main menu scene, because obviously we want to create a lobby as soon as we press the create lobby button in the menu. The easiest way to do this is using the singleton pattern. So I'm going to make a private static bootstrap manager that I'm going to call instance, and then in the awake functionality I'm just going to set instance equals to this, like so. Oh sorry, instance equals this, like so. And now that that's done, we can very easily make a public static void that I'm going to call create lobby. This can now be called from anywhere by simply just writing bootstrap manager.create lobby. Inside of this create lobby method, what we want to be now using is what's called the Steam matchmaking system, which is what allows for creating lobbies. So I think a concept that's very important for me to explain at this point is some of the data structure that you need to understand. So let's say that each of our circles are individual Steam clients, right? These are not necessarily connected to each other. They don't have much understanding of each other and they barely know each other exists. But as soon as we make a lobby, we basically enclose them in this system and they'll easily be able to see, well, who else is in the lobby, and they'll be able to grab data from them and so on. And technically you can do this across the Steam network without lobbies. Lobbies just, in my opinion, makes it much easier accessible and it makes it nicer to work with. So when I mention a Steam lobby in this case, it's not a lobby how you think it, how you see it in game. It's basically just this connection of Steam clients. So what we need to be using in this case is what's called Steam matchmaking.create lobby. This needs some data types where we need to tell it, well, exactly who can join, how many members, and so on. Of course, you can set this up as variables, but I'm just gonna set it in here. So I want it, for example, to be the lobby type of friends only, and I want that to be able to be 4 members at max. And then I just end that, and boom, now we've created a lobby. Now, what happens when you create a lobby is you're automatically added to this lobby, which means that the onLobby created will run, as well as after that, the onLobby entered will also run. This is important to know. Whereas when you try and join a lobby, it will have an onJoin request and a lobby entered. So it will skip this onLobby created. So obviously we know that our host of our game should be running in here on the onLobby created and be set up in there. Just to check that all of this works as it should, we can in here write a debug.log and just say starting lobby creation. And we can actually also tell it exactly how it went, or we can debug starting lobby creation, and then we can say if it is successful. So we can grab our callback dot, and this is called m_e_result, which is how it went, if something went wrong or if it went correctly. And we can of course just make this into a string. Should already be converted, but I just like to do it to make sure. So now we should hopefully get a success message when we try and make a lobby. Now let's go into our main menu, because at this point we're going to need the main menu manager to also handle calling creating a menu. So let me create a main menu manager here, and let's go and create a main menu manager script and attach it to the game object once it's done compiling. So opening up the main menu manager, we of course want to work with Unity's UI system, however that you usually do it. In my case, I'm just going to set it up as an instance, as I've already done in the other one as well, because we're going to be using this in the future. So main menu manager instance, and in the awake functionality, I'm just going to say instance equals to this. But now what we can do is we can just have a public void that's called create, and all this will now do is it will grab the bootstrap manager.create lobby. If you recall, this is what we made in here to do the Steam matchmaking.create lobby, which should then run the onLobby created functionality, and we should get this debug. So let's just go and connect this very briefly now, just to test that it actually works when I press on create lobby. So going to this create lobby button, I need to of course make an on-click functionality. Gonna drag in the main menu manager, and on the main menu manager we're gonna do the create lobby function. Now one thing that's really good to note is you always, when testing, want to start from the bootstrap scene now, because this is where the Steam connection is set up. So if you're not running it from here, it won't work. So we go into the bootstrap, now it opened up the main menu, and we can click create, and you can see it's starting lobby creation. The result was eResult OK, which means this is a successful message and the lobby creation has now worked. Because that this is also how this callback right here is also how that we figure out if everything went well, we can actually set up a check to make sure that we don't continue doing anything before we are sure that the lobby is created successfully. So what we can do is we can take this callback result and we can just check that if it is not equals to eResult.k, just find the OK, there it is, eResult OK. If it's not equals to this, we just want to return. You could also debug in here telling the developer that something went wrong in the creation, but what's really important is just that we return out of this, so anything that we write down here means that the lobby is successfully created. Now how I like to set it up is I always like to keep track of what lobby are we currently in. So what I want to do now is I'll make a public static, and this is a ulong, which is basically a value as you know it, and this is the current lobby ID. The current lobby ID will then be set down here, so we can set the ID immediately, current lobby ID, to make sure that this is always synchronized correctly. So this will be equals to the callback.m_ulong Steam ID lobby. And there we go. Now we always have a reference as to which lobby that we're in, and we can use this for future reference. Now the thing is, the reason why we're setting up a lobby is in order to be able to easily share data amongst other players, and we want to be able to manually set up this data. Now all of this will be handled in the paid version of Heathens, but again, we're sticking to the free version right here, so we have to do it manually. So what we want to do is we want to grab the Steam matchmaking again, and then we can do set lobby data. Now in here, the most important piece of data that we can set is is the address that people should connect to in terms of setting up the connection and so on. Now, the first thing that you do is you need to grab the Steam ID, which is the Steam lobby ID. What we have to do now is we need to set up a new Steam CID from this lobby ID that we just saved. So current lobby ID, we can just implement in here and then comma. And now we need to give it what the data should be called that we're saving. In my case, I'm going to call this the host address. Now make sure that this is spelled correctly. That's very important because we're going to be referencing it in the future. And now we need to set this value as a string. And so what we can just do is we can call Steam user, which basically allows us to get information about users, and we can get Steam ID, which means we're getting our own ID, and we can just convert this to a string immediately. So now what we're doing is when we create the lobby, we're going into the lobby data, setting that up of the lobby that we're in. We're setting the host address variable. This is just a naming convention, and we're setting that equals to our Steam ID. The reason why we're doing this is when people then connect, they can go and grab this host address and set that and connect to it. Now, just for fun's sake, as to get you guys more used to it as well, we can also go in here and we can set the name of the lobby as well. So I'm just gonna grab the name of it, and we can call it our Steam name and then lobby, for example. So if we go to Steam friends.get persona name, we're actually just gotten our own name. Just for good measure, you can always call to string, but it should already be like that. And then I can just say plus and then SS lobby. So in this case, that should say Bobsy's lobby when we connect. And now we want to do the actual connection stuff in terms of FishNet. So as we did before, we grabbed Fishy's teamworks, so we can grab that directly. And what we basically want to set now, if I go into the network manager, is we want to set this client address down here before we start up the connection. Now with Fishy's teamworks, as I mentioned, this is the user64 ID. So down here, we want to grab Fishy's teamworks dot set client address because it's the client address that we want to set, and we have to say what we set this to. And well, this is the host address, the one that we set up here, which we set with this value. So we can just grab all of this, paste it in here again to make sure that it's the exact same, and this should just work. Now we can start the connection as a server, but we're not going to start the connection as a client yet. So we can grab Fishy's teamworks dot start connection, and then in here you have to say true or false. This is basically whether you are the server or not. So in this case, I'm going to set it to true. Now keep in mind that if you recall on the two buttons that show up from standard in FishNet, there's both server and client, and you have to press both of them for it to work. This is basically like only pressing the top button. We're only starting as a server. We're not joining it as a client at this point. And down here, I just like doing a little debug log saying that the lobby creation was successful. Something like that, just to confirm that everything now here works. Now, this means that when we create the lobby, as up here, create lobby, all of this code should now run successfully, set all the data, and so on. Now we need to control what happens when there's a join request or when the lobby was successfully entered. So let's start with the join request. This is very easy. All we basically need to do is grab Steam matchmaking.join lobby and simply just join the lobby with the correct ID. So we just grab the callback.m_Steam ID lobby, and that's it. Now it connects to the lobby. So this basically just means that when people have a join request, they will just be prompted to yes, join the lobby. This is where you can have some kind of authentication or whatever if you'd like. But in my case, I just want them directly to join, which means now when both running this and this will end up down here as clients no matter what. So this is what we now have to handle. So a good thing once again to do is just make sure that the current lobby ID is set to the lobby that you're actually joining. This means that if you come from up here as a host, it's not actually going to change the ID at all. But if you come as a client from here that hasn't joined before, it will change. So this is just a good way to make sure. And now what I basically want to do is I want to just start the connection. So the same way up here as we set the client address. So I can grab _Fishy's teamworks dot set client address. And well, now is where we need to grab the data that we set up here in terms of the host address. So in here we can grab Steam matchmaking dot get lobby data, and you basically have to tell it from which lobby, just like we did up here. So we can just grab this basically in here and say what data do we want to get. And in our case, it's this host address. The reason why I'm copy pasting is to make sure that everything is spelled correctly as to not have any issues. Now we can go into Fishy's teamworks as well and say start connection. And this time we say false because we're not the server. We're going to be joining us at the client at this point. So just to go through it once more, very basically, up here we're starting the connection as the server, and once this lobby creation is successful, we will go down here and then we'll start the connection as a client as well. So if you're the host, you'll be both the server and the client, which is how it works as being a host. And if you're not the host, you will only be joining as a client because, well, if you join through this, you're obviously not running this code up here. I hope this all makes sense and that this is very clear. For now, we actually don't have much to test, but if we go test, we should see that the FishNet connection should also start when we press create lobby. You can show both local server started, then lobby creation was successful, and then the local client started. So everything is working as it should. And you can see the remote connection started successfully as well. So now we're connected with FishNet. Now let's just leave out again. And going back to here, this all should work now, but we can also set it up so we can easily test with the client. So let's get working on actually setting up the main menu scene as well to work how we want it. So what I always like to do is I like to make a void close all screen, which just clears. This is just a very basic UI setup that I'm making here. And there's a few things that we of course want to grab in here. So I'm just gonna grab serialized field, private, and then I'm just gonna copy paste this because we'll be using that a few times. First of all, I want to grab the object of the menu screen, and then I also want to grab the lobby screen because these are the two screens. And then down here we can just say menu screen dot set active to false, and the same with lobby screen dot set active to false. So whenever that we add a new screen, I just make sure to close it down here always. Now another thing that we also want to grab is the text mesh pro underscore input field. This obviously requires you to be using TM Pro up here as well. Now this input field will just be called the lobby input. This is obviously the friends code that we can use to join with, and then we'll also be grabbing the text mesh pro UGUI in terms of the lobby title and the lobby ID text, which is where we'll be showing the ID that players can use to join. And then last thing is, of course, I want to grab the start game button to make sure that this is only shown for the host. So start game button. So only the host will be able to start the game. This is really all the basic stuff that we want to grab. So now we have this close all screens. Now we can also make a public void open main menu, which will run close all screens first, and then it will run the lobby, the main menu. So menu screen dot set active to true. And we can also make a public void open lobby screen, or for that sake just open lobby, and this will then run the exact same, but instead of it being the menu screen, it will just be the lobby screen. I hope this makes sense. This is a very basic setup. So from the menu now we can actually just go and set this up just to see it actually working. So let's go and feed it all the information. So we have the main menu screen, we have the lobby screen, then we have the lobby ID input, and we have the lobby title, which I believe is this text up here. Yes, it is. That's the lobby title. Then there's the lobby ID text here, which is this string of text out here. And then there's just the start game button, which is in the lobby screen as well. So now everything out here is populated correctly. And now let's go and set it up so it actually works. But the thing is, we want all this to be working a little bit differently. So rather than just having, for example, the back button just open the main menu, it also needs to, leave the lobby and handle all of that stuff in the background. So I'll actually be making a public void, which is called leave lobby, which is how we leave the lobby. And we're also going to be making a public void join lobby, which is what's actually going to be called from the inspector, or called from the buttons in the menu. So let's start with join lobby. This basically needs to know which lobby are we trying to join. This is what will be called from the, actually also something I always like to do in here is just in the start functionality, just run open main menu. So this means that we don't actually have to take care of which menu here is open or not, because it will always just default to opening the main menu. So you can see when I press play, it's just in the main menu. Now the join lobby function will be what's called when you press this join lobby down here. So the ID will be filled in. It will grab that ID, and then it will send that directly to the Bootstrap manager and say, hey, join the lobby with this ID. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to, of course, grab the ID that comes in, and we actually want to convert this to a CSteam ID, which is what is used to join. So we can set up a new CSteam ID, which again is in using Steamwork, and we can just call this the Steam ID, and this is equals to a new CSteam ID, and then the code converted to a uint64 from the text. So unfortunately we can't just do lobby input.text. This will not work. We need to convert this to a uint. So what we can luckily just do, which is standard C# functionality, is we can do run convert.to uint64, and then we can input what we want to convert, and this should just work. Now it converts it to a uint64, which will then be converted into a CSteam ID through this, and now we can actually send this on to the Bootstrap manager. But first of all, we need a function that can take it in. So let's make this function by making a public static void, and we're going to call join by ID, which will take in the CSteam ID that we just converted and just call that Steam ID and expand that. And we just very briefly go to the network manager here and just call that, or the main menu manager, sorry, confusing it, and just call the join by ID and just send in the Steam ID. Go. Now we don't have to do anything more in here. Going to the Bootstrap manager again, we can set up a debug just to make sure that everything is correct and say that we are attempting to join lobby with ID, and this is an ID of the Steam ID dot m_Steam ID. Like that. So now we can just print what ID we're trying to join to follow along. And then the first thing that we can do is we can just make a quick check saying if this lobby actually exists. So we can say Steam matchmaking dot request lobby data, and then from the Steam ID of a lobby. And that means that if it actually returns data and we can grab it, that means it exists. And in which case we can run Steam matchmaking dot join lobby with the Steam ID, and then we will successfully join it. And we can easily just make a debug here saying that if it doesn't grab it, we can just debug.log and say failed to join lobby with ID of this up here again. I hope this makes sense. We can actually just go test it right now. It should just fail every time, but you should be able to see in the debug log that it is successfully called. So, whoops, again, need to start from the bootstrap scene, starting up, writing in some ID that doesn't exist, click join lobby. Oh, I've completely forgot to connect it, of course. That's silly me. Let's go to the main menu, to the join lobby button, and of course set it up with the main menu manager. And say join lobby. There we go. I'll just go test it, and I'll just type in a random ID, press join lobby. You can see it says attempting to join lobby and fail to join lobby because, well, the lobby doesn't exist. But this is just good to have as debugging. If the lobby did exist, it should then enter us into the lobby with the join lobby command, which, if you remember, also is run up here and will then be prompted into the on lobby entered. So now next thing that we want to do is let's open up the lobby screen from the main menu. So we actually go to the lobby setup here, we set the lobby name and so on, and handle all of that how we want it. So let's go into the main menu manager, and of course we still have this leave lobby as well, which let's just take care of that very quickly. That should just open the main menu, and it should also handle leaving the lobby. So let's go into the bootstrap manager, make a public static leave lobby function, void of course, and in here we can just say bootstrap manager.leave lobby. And when leaving the lobby, there's a few things that we want to handle. First of all, we of course want it to in Steam leave the lobby, so we can grab Steam matchmaking.leave lobby, and we want to convert it into a C Steam ID again, which was our current lobby ID. So now we're just telling it what lobby do we want to leave. It should be our current lobby, and for good measure, just to make sure that we're not holding data that we shouldn't, we can say current lobby ID equals to 0, just to remove any information about the old lobby we were in. And then the last thing that we want to do is just stop the FishNet connection. So we can grab the instance, because right now, keep in mind, we're in static, so that's why we need to grab the instance ._fish_steamworks.stop connection. And we want to stop the connection as a client always. In all cases, we're going to be a client because this is a peer-to-peer setup. And then we can also just quickly grab the instance .the network manager and just check, are we the server? So if we are the server, we also want to stop the connection as the server. So like this, and just set it to true. Now we're also successfully stopping the connection again as a server. We can go test this very easily as well by going into lobby. You can see the back button should be what's calling that, setting that up, going into the main menu manager and set leave lobby. Now let's go to the bootstrap scene and test this out. So I go in here. Oh, actually, I just realized we didn't even have it change scene, but let me just try and do it manually just to showcase what I mean. We do this and I press the back button. You can see it open the main menu and it stopped the server as well as the client for Fishy Steamworks. So that works as it should as well. Of course, now let's go to actually having the scene act as we want to. So opening up the lobby when that works, which it should do here. So in the main menu manager, we can use a similar setup. So let's go and do that. Let me actually set it up here by the open lobby and then make a public static void that is then called once we enter the lobby. So I can call this lobby entered. And what we want to send in here is just information about what the lobby is called and whether we're the host. Because remember, if we are the host, we want the start button to be able to start the game and move on from that. So first things first, we can grab the instance.lobbytitle.text and set that equals to the lobby name. The next thing that we can do is we can grab the instance.startGame button and the game object of that, set active, and then set that to whether we are the host or not. So if we are the host, it will be true. If we're not the host, it will be false and it will not be active. Next thing that we can do is we can grab the lobby.lobbyIDText.text and we can set that to the bootstrap manager.currentLobbyID in order to actually display that, and then of course make it to string just to ensure that that can be shown. And now we just want to open up lobby. Of course, that is instance.openLobby that we called it, like so. And yeah, this should basically be it. Now, once the lobby is successfully entered, we need to make sure that this lobby entered is called. So what we can now do is inside of this lobby entered, which is obviously called when we successfully join a lobby, we can just check whether we are the server or not. So we can just say if the network manager dot is server, which means if we are the server, we want to grab the main menu manager.lobby entered functionality. And here we want to send in the name. So we get the data just how we do right here. We grab the data in the same way. And the data that we want to grab is the name of the game. And then we want to say whether we're the server or not. And we can actually, I just realized we can just send this in here. We actually don't need this if statement at all. We can just send in whether we are the server or not. And this should basically work. Now that if I go back and I test it, so let's go to the bootstrap scene again to make sure we start from there. And I click create lobby. You should now see that it says Bubsy's lobby. It's set an ID and we're connected with FishNet. And now let me just quickly send a build to my other computer in order to actually test that all of this works properly. For this, I'm using something called game build, which is super handy. I can just easily build to the web and the other computer can just download it very quickly. When testing with Steam, it's important to know that you cannot have two Steam connections started at the same time. So you need two computers to properly test. That can either be a good friend or it can be your your second computer. Maybe you have a laptop and a desktop or something along the lines of that. So there we go. I just started it, made sure to start it from the bootstrap scene on this one, and I started the game on my other computer. Now this is a very long ID obviously, so I am gonna take a little bit to write that in, but like so, and I click join lobby, and now you can see I'm in Bobby Lobby's lobby. It got the information, it started as a local client in Fishy Steamworks, and everything seems to work, connecting, finding a route, and everything's working. Now we're in this lobby setup, and I can click back, and it will also stop all the connections and send us back to the main menu, and I can join again. And as you can see, this just works. Now we actually have a lobby, we're connected to each other, and I don't have the start game button here because I'm not the host. Now the last thing that we want to do is really just have the start game button actually work, and then you have a lobby setup that's fully functional how you'd want it. So for this, I might not be doing everything exactly how they want it, but I have a client object here that just has a network object on it, and that's all. See, the position doesn't even matter. Nothing about this object matters. But going on to the network manager and the player spawner, I'm just going to add this client here. As to when you start a connection, it will actually start up a client. So if I go here, click start, you can see now there's a client object here, which also has a network observer on him. And this is what's really important. This is what I'll be using to handle the changing of scenes and hopefully doing it somewhat properly. So what we need now is also a bootstrap network manager. So I'll just call this bootstrap network manager. This is because this bootstrap manager will have to act without being on the network, because if it is on the network, as you can see here, if I start a network object, I add a network object to it and I start the scene, you can see this bootstrap network manager is disabled from default because it has a network object until we start a connection, and now it's enabled. And this is the behavior that we don't want on the regular bootstrap manager. That's why you do not want network scripts on the bootstrap manager, because this needs to work prior to any connections having started, and that's why I'm making a bootstrap network manager. Now let me make a script for that as well, which is going to be called bootstrap network manager. And let's just add that to the bootstrap network manager. So, and let's enter that. Now this doesn't have to do much, but we will be handling the scene management in here. So once again, I'll be making a private static bootstrap network manager and call this instance. And in awake, I will once again set instance equals to this. So, and here I'll just have a single call actually for everybody. That's just going to be called public static void change network scene. And all this will take in is it will take in the scene name that it will have to start up, and it will also take in an array of the scenes that it will want to close. So scenes to close, like so. So this way, whenever that we want to change scene over the network, we can easily just call this and it will handle everything for us, opening up the new scene and closing the scenes that we might want closed. So first of all, we'll need to be able to send a server RPC to everyone and an observer's RPC to everyone. This has to be done through the server RPC. So server RPC, and I'm always just going to do require ownership equals to false. And I'm just going to call this one close scenes. And this will take in that string array that we just had made up before, scenes to close, like so. And we can actually just call this one in here. So close scenes, and that's going to be the scenes to close, like so. And sorry, that has to be instance because we are in singleton right now. And then we're going to be having the close scenes observer functionality, which will once again also take in the string of scenes to close, like so. And this is an observer's RPC, which means that when this one calls it, like so, it will send it out to everybody. So everybody will get this information about that they have to close this scene. So I'm going to make a for each loop here, go through all the scenes to close, and the variable over here we can just call the scene, or actually let's call it the scene name just to not confuse things because it is a string. And then in here we're going to grab Unity Engine .scene management .scene manager .unload scene async, and that's going to be the scene name that it's going to unload, like that. There we go. And this is basically it. Now it closes all the scenes with just this one line of code. Now with FishNet you have to work with what's called scene load data, which is basically the information about what scene that you want to load up. So I'm going to make a new scene load data. Just gonna call this SLD equals to new scene load data, and we can just popularize this with the scene name that we want to load, and that's it. Now in here it holds all the information about the scene that we want to load on the network. The reason why you have to load scenes like this, well, it's to be able to make sure that the scenes are loaded correctly for everyone and is synchronized and everything is networked in the scene as well, as that's why we have to do it like this. We also have to make an array of connections that will be the ones that will be changed to scene. Now we want everybody to have their scenes changed, so we can just grab instance.serverManager. And of course I'll want to be using fishnet.connection as well as fishnet.managing.scenes as well as fishnet.object. And I completely forgot as well that we want to make the script into a network behavior, and this is how we can grab the server manager easily in the instance. So the server manager, and then we can grab all the clients, or we can just say clients.values.toArray. And this now means that we have all the connections in here of all the players that we want loaded, and now we can do the actual scene changing. So we can do instance.sceneManager.load connection scenes, and we can send in the connections that will have to change and the scene load data that we will be changing to. And this should just work. So now we can call this change network scene from wherever that we want to actually start the game. So let's go to the main menu manager. That's where we want to start the game from. And I'm just going to scroll down to the bottom, make a new public void called start game, which will then make the array of the scenes to close, which will be a new string array, which we can just popularize with whatever that we want to close in here. In my case, I just want to close the menu scene. So if we just go out, double check what it's called. So you can see we have the menu scene Steam here, and I'm just gonna copy the name of that and now go back into my code and throw that in there. And now it will close the menu name scene again. Of course, you can just make this a variable at the top, but I already know what I want to close. So I'm just gonna keep it like this. And then I'm gonna grab the Bootstrap network manager dot change network scene, and I'm gonna send in the scene that we want to load as well as the scenes to close. And the scene that we want to load in my case is the Steam game scene. So going back in here, I can just say Steam game scene. Hopefully that should be spelled correctly. And now the start game method just needs to be called from the start game button. So going into the main menu scene here, to the canvas, to the lobby, and then we have the start game button. Grab the main menu manager, drag it down here, main menu and start game. And now hopefully everything should just work out. So let's just go test it single player first before I build to make sure we didn't miss anything. I can now create lobby. You can see now that I'm the host, I have the start game button. I can click start game and it will change into the scene. And as you can see, it also now loaded everything because now it's a network connected scene. So that's why we now see that all the trees and so on have spawned. And of course, from here on out, you can handle the player spawning. So in order to test out properly, let me go and build it again, send it to my other computer, and you should be able to see that all connections are moved as well. So I now have it on my other computer. So I'm going to create a lobby over there. That worked successfully. Now let me write in the long code again and click join lobby. You can now see I'm in the game. I don't have the start button. I'm connected to FishNet, and I can now click start game over here, and you can see we'll both be connected to the same scene and everything should work as expected. And yeah, that's really it. Hopefully everything works for you. If not, feel free to join the Discord, leave a comment with your issue. I respond to pretty much every single comment. I don't think I've ever missed a single comment ever, and I'll do my best to continue doing that. If this was helpful to you, subscribing really means a lot, and I just hope that you have a wonderful day.